If you're interested in exploring these topics further, learning and connecting with like-minded individuals, check out the 3 Patreon discussion groups available. Just visit theinfinitesparkofbeing.com and click the participate button. I also offer a free meditation group online every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. Just go to any of my social media profiles for the link found in my link tree. There's no pressure to be on camera or to actively participate in any of these groups. Just come and listen and enjoy. Join an online spiritual community of everyday people committed to understanding the human experience more deeply through spiritual practices that we can apply to our everyday lives. Join us. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and in this episode, we're going to take a look at the concept of collective karma. But first, we need to refresh our understanding of karma itself. First off, we need to understand that karma is not what is happening, but how the mind relates to what is happening. Karma is neither good nor bad. In Sanskrit, it simply means doing or action. So we have to be very careful not to turn this into some Western Judeo-Christian punishment reward system. So with that, please forget all of those ridiculous pop culture references about karma being a bitch or anything like that, though my favorite one is actually karma's gonna get ya. Because it's usually being said by someone whose mind is relating to something in a less than equanimous way. So really, that person is the one experiencing what could be considered bad karma, as they are the ones having difficulty with what's happening. You know, there's a principle in the occult, which is if you go throwing curses, then you need to be ready for what's going to come back at you. The curse will come back at you. Remember, as above, so below, as within, so without. It is a mirror. Remember that when you go saying things like karma's gonna get them. So for those of you new to the spiritual path, equanimous or equanimity means having no strong emotional response or even being even-tempered, which it's actually the optimal state. And since this relates to karma, let me say a bit more about equanimity. To start, be very clear, equanimity doesn't mean that we don't have opinions or that we don't care about what's happening. It's more like this. You have thoughts and opinions about something, but your nervous system isn't reacting. Equanimity is actually something that we can cultivate through meditative practice. It's one of the many benefits of engaging in shamatha, which means calm abiding. A better way to describe it might be an experience that we've all had where we heard that someone we knew or maybe a relative had died, but we didn't really feel anything. Notice that I'm making a distinction between feeling and thinking. It's an important distinction. Intellectually, you know it's sad, but for whatever reason, you don't cry or have that visceral emotional response. You might even think to yourself, why aren't I more sad about this? Didn't I care about them? What kind of an asshole am I? Well, of course you cared. But we're so used to having our thoughts and feelings tangled up in our experiences that any separation between them can feel alarming, and it can cause the mind to whirl around a bit. I see this a lot when I work with people on grief and loss. They often believe that feeling okay, like feeling at peace, means that they didn't care about the person or that they don't care that this person has died. What I usually say to that is this. Pain doesn't equal love. The amount of discomfort or tightness you feel in your body around the death of someone isn't related to how much you love them or how much love you have for them. Grief is not a sacred thing to be protected. It's a confusion in the mind. Actually, I probably need to revisit grief in an episode very soon. So I see this with every client, actually, no matter the situation. I have to tell them upfront, I'm going to help you get to a place where your body no longer reacts to the memory. This doesn't mean that you don't care about what happened to you or that you're glad it happened. What it means is that you're okay right here today in this moment. You're okay. Your mind now knows that you're safe right now. So you're okay. You are okay. And that sucked. These are two things that can coexist in the mind. You see, I'm not necessarily talking to the client in these situations. I'm really talking to the subconscious, because that's who's really running the show. The subconscious is the one that needs to be brought into the present moment where they are safe and no longer being harmed. So think about it. Most of the time, you categorize your emotions and their severity based on how you feel, not what you think. Again, there's a distinction between feeling and thinking. A lot of clients will say, I guess I just don't care. You get them to that point and they just think they don't care. And then when I ask them why they might believe they don't care, they say, because I don't feel anything. Then I ask, oh, so you're glad it happened? And then they respond, well, no, I'm not. Okay. See, that's when it all clicks. That is the light. When I tell people light conquers darkness every time, they think I mean bliss and happiness conquer sadness and anger, but that's not true. That's not what Krishna or Buddha taught. They taught equanimity. Bliss and happiness need to be maintained, and we get attached to them. When they wane, we start grasping for ways to sustain those feelings and then cling to the things that we believe will allow us to revisit and maintain bliss and happiness. However, equanimity allows us to experience bliss, happiness, and even sorrow and anger. When we cultivate that equanimous quality, we allow happiness and bliss to wane without becoming frantic, that we're losing them. And when it comes to sadness and anger, we allow them both to arise and recede in their own time without needing to push, pull, or do something about it. You see, when spiritual texts say that we are led by the senses, that's what they mean. It's about being driven by physical urges in the nervous system. So, karma, think about how easier it would be to make decisions and do something other than what you normally do if your nervous system wasn't urging your body. That's the space cultivated through meditation, and that's the space where we change our experience, how we relate to what's happening, how we change our karma. So this takes us into a slight digression, but I always need to kind of address this when I'm discussing this topic, equanimity, karma, all that. We need to kind of get into intuition really quick. Intuition isn't a physical feeling. Those are urges. Those are urges of the body. Intuition is something else. It's a deep, doubtless knowing. It isn't a feeling felt by the nervous system. Intuition is a knowing with a capital K. It's more like a download of knowledge. It's fearless. It feels liberated. You just know the truth, right? With a capital T. And often those moments don't come with a physical sensation, which is why decisions made in those moments of equanimity and freedom, they always tend to work out. So feeling that you should choose option X over option Y because of the quote unquote bad vibes, it isn't intuition. That's fear. That's the conscious mind. That's your body perceiving a threat, real or imagined, metaphorical or actual. Maybe it's the threat of failure, lack, or something else, but feeling a deep, unshakable knowing to go with option X without even considering option Y, that's intuition. That's knowing with a capital K. Now, I know that some of you are going into extreme what ifs and extreme examples because you're attached to your concept of intuition. But think about the times you've had that knowing. There was no fear of the alternative. You just followed your intuition. The correct choice was obvious. Now, this doesn't mean that going with your gut or your body hasn't led you to the right thing. Of course it does. And some of you believe that, all of your decisions should be made through intuition. But remember, we must be in the world and not of the world. We are not of the body, but we are certainly in the body. Sometimes we listen to the body. Other times we listen to the divine mind. So back to karma and feelings. Karma is not a punishment reward system. It's not a bitch. It's not going to get you. And it's not the event in front of you. It's the way your mind relates to the event. Bad stuff is going to happen. It's the nature of a human birth. It's old age, sickness, and death. It's impermanence. So karma becomes your predisposition to attractions and aversions. It's what you are attracted to and what you tend to avoid. We aren't always attracted to things that align with the soul, right? And we are sometimes averse to things that are aligned with the soul, right? That's when we're stuck in the body, stuck as the organism, and not really living in the divine mind or with the soul. So let me tell you a story that I've told a million times. It'll help us get to the collective karma piece a bit faster. So I see spiritual practice as a process of learning to let go of things, ideas, others, and what have you. So, and we do that so that we can release our bodies when the time comes. The experience of my dad dying and being with him through it helped me to imagine my own death. I would sit and imagine it. I would try to trade places with him. And it helped me to imagine my mom's death as well. Both of these things are inevitable, right? So the practice of sitting with my mom, and yes, it became a practice, constantly brought my mind back to truth. Capital T. When my mind would become frantic and helpless, I would think of the soul. I had to hear the sadness of her words, feel the sadness in my body, hold space, and acknowledge those feelings. But at the same time, I had to know that it was her mind doing all of this. Her mind was frantic and whirling. Who she is, however, the soul, the divine being I entered into this relationship with, was moving on. But her organism was fighting. So just as the breath centers us during meditation, our mala beads bring us home during japa, the concept of the soul, the remembrance of the soul brought me back while sitting by her bedside. She was moving on, and as her son, it was painful. But when I sat with it as a soul, it was beautiful and touching. So my personal karma during all of this was, in my experience, good. I held space and I held her hand, and we just would sit and watch the news exchanging I love yous. As her son, I loved her deeply, and as she let go of her body, as a fellow soul, I watched another soul with whom I'd made an agreement move on, leaving me here to finish this without her, just as we planned. And now, as I've said before, my aunts, because my mother, I guess technically shouldn't have died, right? She went in for something routine. They kind of fucked up in the end. And look, the way I see it is they do hundreds of these things a week. And, you know, they were extubating her. She lost her ability to swallow and eventually elected to starve to death. Now, they got on this thing about, you know, who should be held responsible and all this kind of stuff. And I remembered something Bada Hari Das said to me. He said, "You're on the plane. It's going from San Diego to Miami, and there's nothing you can do about it." And, you know, on one hand, he was talking about your entire life. But on the other hand, he meant like each moment. So this flight of my mom dying, my mom dropping her body, and, you know, that flight was in the air. It's already in the air. It's in progress. I can't really do anything about it. So how am I going to experience this flight? Trauma responses, anxiety, ruminating thinking, grief and loss, stress, these are all reoccurring patterns in the mind. They're often the result of reacting the same way over and over again. Why do we do this? Because the mind believes the past is still here, happening now, causing the nervous system to respond accordingly. What the mind perceives, the body feels. Mind Transformation and Restructuring, MTR, offers a pathway to release these patterns. It guides both the mind and the nervous system out of these repetitive cycles and into a lighter, freer way of being. If this resonates with you, feel free to reach out via direct message or through the contact section at theinfinitesparkofbeing.com. You don't have to live the way you've been living. Change is possible. It's happening. So rather than argue with anybody at the nursing station, I just hung out with her, right? And thanks to my spiritual practice, my attachments weren't so tight, and I never want to seem like I didn't love my mother. Obviously I did, but my spiritual practice set me up for this. Theirs did not, in short. Now, if you're attached to mom's bodies and all that, this might sound insane or like I'm bypassing my feelings or trying to escape pain, but I assure you it was painful. I promise. Don't worry. I was hurting. If this is infuriating for you to hear, the difference was how my mind related to the event. My mind related to the event through the lens of spiritual practice. My aunts, their minds related to the event through the material world. Moms are going to die. Souls do not die. I am forever connected to her and my dad. Those two souls and I are bound. But really, we all are, right? And speaking as the organism, though, I am bound to those souls, those humans. We took birth with others in my family and close friends in what some people would call a soul pod or a group of souls. So, and my personal karma through these moments was good. My attractions and aversions to this day have improved, and they continue to improve. And, it leads to a largely carefree and wonderful life. Are there hiccups? Of course. They're bound to happen. But through the grace of practice, I relate to these events as part of that practice. Like the difficulty of life is part of the spiritual practice. That improves my karma. That changes my experience. That allows me to have a better time of it, right? The result is a very beautiful life. So when we talk about collective karma, we mean the way our attractions and aversions lead us to others that have complementary attractions and aversions or similar attractions and aversions. I'm noticing that with old friends. I just don't have that thing anymore. I feel like sometimes I'm maintaining these friendships on some sort of weird life support that's only in my mind based off history that no longer exists. So I guess a great way to start with this, because it's the most sticky and difficult, is family. Now, this takes us into metaphysical concepts that are largely unprovable. Not large, they're completely unprovable, which is where all the fun happens. That said, you don't have to believe any of this. So when we take birth, okay, get your seatbelt on, we are propelled toward a type of, you could call it a portal or a gateway, and it's based on vibration, so to speak. I'm using very general terms to avoid getting into the minutia of all of this, but the vibration is our attractions and aversions. Buddhism describes this process extensively as far as what you see and things like that. But I mean, who really knows what things look like when we no longer have a human body with faulty eyes that only sees a sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum? So really, we have to trust, assume, and use our imaginations. Just run it through your own filters, right? However, I can say that the Buddhist explanation it's thorough, but it's completely fucking overwhelming. But it really does show the mind's role in this whole thing, which was what makes it so daunting. You're like, oh my God. And that is when I truly understood when Lama Lo-san said, we are all a snowflake in a blizzard. Anyway, so as a soul or a consciousness, we move through or toward this gateway because we're attracted to it. That gateway, apparently, according to certain religious texts, is the act of sexual intercourse between your parents. So, it sounds crazy, strange at first, but the more I think about it, the more time I spend with it, the more it just kind of fucking makes sense. I mean, what else would it be, right? Like you're drawn towards this thing and it's conception. So, pop right in there. Now, if we accept that idea, we realize something. We realize something else. And it's this realization that will be a problem for some of you. But, here it is. We don't just come out of the womb as a blank slate, just waiting for our parents to fill our consciousness with information. Instead, we have things in common with them, which is why we take birth with them in the first place. That's why we were attracted to that quote unquote gateway sex in the first place. Whether this is planned or not is a topic for another day, and who the fuck knows. But if we are going to engage with spiritual concepts, then we have to consider that if we pass through that gateway or are propelled towards that opening based on our attractions and aversions, it means that we probably had or have something in common with these people that we took birth with or took birth through. And if you dislike your parents, then this whole concept is it's kind of a real motherfucker. And it's difficult to look at, but please, I encourage you to. Something I tell people often, I always used to say that I had a difficult relationship with my dad, a very confrontational relationship. But then I realized one day I was the only one having a confrontational relationship, and that he was simply just loving me, and I was just kind of being an asshole. Anyway, now, so if we extrapolate from there, from what we're talking about, these gateways, portals, we see the interconnectedness of family, right? We take birth through this line of people, DNA or whatever, because we share something with these other souls. Maybe we have similar work to do. Maybe the work is with each other. Maybe it's a simple complementary karma thing. I don't know. I tend to lean toward the idea that we have complementary karma or something in common, especially when I look at my parents, right? That's what I see. And the older I get, the deeper I go, and the more that makes sense. And some of those places we have to kind of dive into are really difficult to look at, but it's worth it. And I know that this can be unappealing for some, but hey, here we are, right? We wanted a human birth with a spiritual twist rather than some boring material existence. So here we are, we're doing it. I also understand that people often shop around for spiritual ideologies that fit into their worldview, and more power to them. But to those folks, I'd say this: there's no easy way to look at this stuff. If there is, it was probably made for an Instagram reel or TikTok. Real spiritual concepts have layers, and they take more than 60 seconds to understand. That's why I do this podcast. That's why I host discussion groups. That's why I offer this free meditation every Sunday evening. I have a knack for breaking things down into more digestible pieces. It was the only compliment Lama Lo-san ever gave me. Now, for better or worse, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So looking for easy answers is probably a symptom of a larger problem, and within the domain of the spiritual is probably not the only place that you do that, right? You do it other places. You cut corners, you look for the easy way out. Anyway, so we start to see, at least a little, how we end up in these families that we're born into. Our personal karma propels us through a bardo state toward a birth that we vibe with, so to speak. Actually, you could probably add so to speak after most things in this episode. So let's for a minute forget about all the metaphysics, right? Let's put all the stuff about souls and portals off to the side for a bit. Karma is our attractions and aversions, and it happens on a deep subconscious level. Romantic relationships are the best way to kind of look at this, since we've all eaten shit sandwiches and we all know what that's like. So one time, a friend of mine said to me, "Man, you attract the craziest women." And I said, "Nope, I look for them." Now, of course, I wasn't intentionally looking, but there was something that I was attracted to. And I don't mean in a positive attract, like I was drawn towards it based on karma. And after years of deep introspection, I know what that thing was. And when you start looking at these things in terms of symptoms, like the symptoms of problems, you start to see your own stuff clearly. Yes, your own stuff, not theirs. That's not your problem. They are not your problem, right? Being able to identify problematic people isn't going to do shit if you don't know what the fuck your stuff is. Remember, you're the only one here. We're all just supporting cast in your melodrama. You are writing this story. What we're talking about here, it's a feature. It's not a bug when it comes to spiritual work. It's a bug when you're just living in the material world, but when you're going up the mountain, you want these things, right? I wouldn't say that you necessarily ask for the trouble, but it's going to happen, so you might as well turn it into spiritual practice. I guess another way to see it is this. If you're noticing that everyone around you, or maybe a handful of folks around you, are really dramatic, problem-centric people, and you find that it's draining you, it's not them, it's you. You were attracted to them. They didn't find you. You let them in. It's just like the lore about vampires. They can't come into your home unless you invite them in. They don't come into your consciousness unless you allow it. So if you want to clean up your personal karma, then you need to look at the collective karma as well. What's going on with you? What's your part in all of this? And I know that can sound shitty to say what's your part in it, but remember, your part might be that you were a victim. And I don't mean that like you're a fucking victim. I mean like you may have been the victim of something. It doesn't always mean that you did something. So please remember that. As for being surrounded by idiots, you got to figure that out. Look, I'm sure they can't live without you, and I'm sure that you'll make the argument, well, what am I supposed to do? Let them suffer. That's up to you. What experience do you want? What do you want this life to look like? Listen, you're not so absolutely wonderful that all of these wounded individuals just can't help but gather around you like you're the St. Francis of Assisi of fuck-ups. You have an attraction to it. There's something there, and you need to look at it if you want something else. Now, we could easily say, oh, well, that's because, you're addicted to helping people. Or my favorite one, which is you're just so completely selfless that you'll be selfless to detriment of your own health and happiness. Nope, that's not it either. It's more icky than that. It's transactional. And as gross as that can be, just spend some time thinking about that. Look at it from a transactional place. Be honest with yourself. You don't need to go embarrassing yourself and discussing with others. You don't need their 2 cents. But you need to look at it on your own. There is a reason we find ourselves surrounded by like-minded people. And if you're looking around thinking, I'm not like these idiots, well, then look at it from a complementary place. Transactional, right? Is there something between you and these other people that might feed off of each other? Just remember, none of this stuff comes out of a vacuum. It's all causal. That means that there are causes and conditions that bring about these circumstances, right? But when you think about karma being our attractions and aversions, you could also see it as culture. So to understand this, we start with ourselves, then we zoom out to our family, our friends, our city, our county, our state, our country, and then the planet. We have things in common, good and bad. When we do that, we start to see a theme within our attractions and aversions. And this theme results in experiences. If we want new experiences, better ones, then there's only one thing we can do, and that's learn to observe the mind and change our thoughts. Once we do that, we can transform our reality and transform our karmic predicament. I love you. I love you. I love you. You've reminded me. Now I'm reminding you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. If you enjoyed this content and would like to support its creation, visit theinfinitesparkofbeing.com. There you can explore the various ways to get involved and support this work. Click the About button, read a little bit about me, and see what I have to offer you through the one-on-one sessions. Don't forget to check out the Patreon tiers, where we're building a community of everyday people with not-so-everyday interests. You'll also find the online apparel store And as always, head over to the participate button and join us. Together, we're growing a community of spiritual seekers just like you.